The first time they saw the dog, it was raining. Not a drizzle, but one of those cold, steady downpours that soaks you through before you even reach the porch. Emily had just stepped out to check the mailbox when she spotted him. Sitting silently on the front step, head low, soaked to the bone, unmoving. He didn't bark, didn't flinch, just sat there, looking at the door as if he belonged on the other side of it. Emily, a mother of two and a recent transplant to this sleepy little town, was startled but not afraid. The dog was old, clearly, with graying fur around the muzzle and stiff legs that creaked as he finally stood when she approached. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't beg. He just looked at her with eyes too tired to pretend. "Hey there, buddy," she said softly, holding the mail against her chest like a shield. "Are you lost?" The dog blinked slowly, then walked down the steps and disappeared into the rain. She told her husband, Mark, that night, but he chalked it up to a stray looking for shelter. "Happens all the time in small towns," he said, turning back to the weather report. "They remember where they used to be fed." Emily let it go, until the next morning, and the one after that. Every day at dawn, rain or shine, the dog would appear on their front porch. Never scratching, never barking, just sitting, watching, waiting. Emily started leaving food out. Not much, just some dry kibble in an old bowl from the garage. The dog would wait until the door closed, then eat in silence. Then he'd leave. The kids named him Dusty, for his ash-colored coat, but Dusty didn't respond to his name, didn't respond to anything at all. He came, he sat, he left. A week passed before something strange happened. Emily's son, Max, 6 years old and obsessed with dinosaurs, came running into the kitchen, eyes wide. "Dusty found my ball," he shouted, holding up a chewed old tennis ball they hadn't seen since they moved in. "It was in the shed, but we've never even opened that shed." Mark laughed. Emily didn't. That night, after the kids were in bed, she went out and sat on the steps beside the old dog. He turned his head slowly but didn't move. "You lived here, didn't you?" she whispered. "A long time ago." The dog blinked. Emily leaned back against the door. The sky was full of stars. "What happened to them?" she asked, not really expecting an answer. The dog lay down beside her with a soft groan, eyes still on the yard like he was guarding something invisible. The porch light flickered, and Emily felt something heavy shift in the air, as if the house itself had paused to listen. The next morning, Emily stood at the window with her coffee, watching Dusty as he circled the porch. This time, he didn't sit at the front door. Instead, he limped toward the far corner of the porch, nose low, ears twitching slightly. He stopped in front of an old wooden planter that had been empty since they moved in, and he just stared. When Emily stepped outside, the dog didn't move. She knelt beside the planter and brushed away a layer of dried leaves. There, almost hidden beneath the dirt and moss, was a small metal tag nailed to the base. Faded but legible, "Bailey's Corner." Not Dusty, Bailey. She turned to the dog. "That was your name, wasn't it?" The ears twitched again. No movement, but the air between them thickened. That evening, Emily searched the local property records. The house had belonged to a man named Richard Sullivan for over 30 years. He'd passed away nearly a decade ago, no next of kin listed. She found an old newspaper clipping online. Local veteran dies at 78. Known for volunteering with animal rescues and his beloved German Shepherd, Bailey. Her chest tightened. The article included a photo, grainy but clear. A man on a porch, sitting in a rocking chair, a gray-muzzled shepherd at his feet. Bailey, Dusty, same eyes, same posture, same silent watchfulness. "Mark," she said later that night, showing him the article. "This is him. He's not just some stray." Mark read the article, nodding slowly. "Okay, so what do we do? I mean, we can't keep him. He's old. He probably needs meds, a vet, and we've already got enough going on." "He doesn't want to be kept," Emily said softly. "He just wants to be here." From that night on, they stopped calling him Dusty. They started calling him Bailey, and something shifted. Bailey began exploring the property more, visiting the same places each morning. The far corner of the yard where a faded rope hung from a tree. The back gate, which creaked loudly but never seemed to close quite right. The garden bed behind the garage, where they later discovered buried chew toys and the remains of a water bowl. It was as if Bailey were walking an invisible path, retracing memories only he could see. One morning, Emily's daughter Sophie came inside holding an old dog collar. It was in the attic, she said, tucked inside a shoebox with some photos. The tag read, "Bailey if found. Bring me home." Home. That word hit differently now. Bailey had brought himself home, and the house, as if remembering its own heart, felt warmer, more alive. Neighbors started stopping by more often, sharing what they remembered of the old man who had lived there. "He and Bailey were inseparable," said Mrs. Carter from across the street. "You'd see them walking just before sunset, every day, no matter the weather." A retired mailman said, "If the old man was on the porch, the dog was at his feet. If he wasn't, Bailey would sit there waiting until he returned. Hours, sometimes." One day, Emily opened the guest room closet and found a small box labeled "Bailey" for when he comes back. Inside was a soft blanket, a well-worn leash, and a short note in careful, shaking handwriting. "If he finds his way home, give him peace. He'll be tired." The note haunted Emily. "If he finds his way home, give him peace. He'll be tired." It echoed in her head whenever she looked at Bailey. He didn't behave like a dog seeking a new life. He wasn't sniffing out territory or begging for attention. He had returned to a place built into his bones. Every morning he lay under the front window watching the yard. Every evening he paced slowly around the perimeter, stopping by familiar trees, steps, corners. Mark began leaving the porch light on without thinking. The kids started whispering when Bailey was asleep, like they didn't want to disturb something sacred. The house wasn't just theirs anymore. It hadn't been for a while. Emily made an appointment with the local vet. Bailey didn't resist the leash. He didn't resist anything. He just followed her to the car like he'd done it many times before. At the clinic, the vet's eyes softened the moment she saw him. "I know this dog," she said. "He was Sullivan's." Emily nodded. "We found him. Well, he found us." The exam was gentle. Bailey had arthritis, failing hearing, a heart murmur. But he wasn't in pain, just tired. The vet handed Emily a small bottle of joint supplements. "He doesn't need saving," she said quietly. "He just needs a place to rest." He came home to say goodbye. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She sat on the porch beside Bailey, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, his head resting on her foot. "Why now?" she asked him. "Why after all these years?" Bailey's eyes blinked slowly. He didn't move, but she remembered the date. It had been exactly 10 years since Sullivan passed. Maybe dogs don't keep calendars, but maybe hearts do. Maybe Bailey had waited until he knew it was okay to come home. Sophie began drawing pictures of him, silly ones at first with wings and sunglasses and superhero capes. But then she drew one that made Emily's chest tighten. Bailey lying on the porch, but behind him stood the faint outline of a man in a rocking chair, hand resting gently on the dog's back. "It's Mr. Sullivan," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "He still watches Bailey. I think they miss each other." Emily hung the drawing on the fridge. Bailey didn't seem to notice, or maybe he did. One morning, Max spilled his cereal in the kitchen and cried when no one came to help. Bailey, slow and stiff, walked inside for the first time. He pressed his head gently into the boy's shoulder. Max stopped crying. Later that day, Bailey climbed the stairs to the second floor and curled up beside Sophie's bed. They found him there hours later, asleep, tail twitching like he was chasing something in a dream. The kids began including Bailey in everything. Reading books out loud, drawing comics where he was the hero, even laying a blanket beside the dinner table, calling it his spot. Bailey never asked for any of it, but he never left either. He had finished his rounds, revisited the places he remembered, and now he was letting himself stay, just for a little while longer. Winter came gently that year, as if nature itself didn't want to disturb the fragile peace in the old house. Snow fell in soft layers, wrapping the yard in silence. Bailey no longer made his daily rounds. Instead, he spent most of his time on the porch or in the kids' room, his body growing slower, heavier, his breath sometimes shaky, but his eyes still bright, still present. Emily had started lighting a fire every evening, even when it wasn't too cold. Bailey liked the warmth. He'd lie just close enough to feel it, front paws tucked, head resting on the floor. Mark didn't say it out loud, but he knew too. They all did. Bailey was fading, not in pain, but in that quiet way old things do, like a page turning gently at the end of a chapter. Sophie stopped drawing wings on him. She started drawing stars. "Do you think dogs know when it's time?" she asked one night as they sat together on the couch. Emily hesitated. "I think they know more than we do." Max didn't ask questions. He just sat by Bailey every night, reading from picture books and softly humming songs with no words. Bailey didn't wag his tail anymore, but his eyes would close slowly, like every sound soothed something deeper. One Saturday, after a particularly still morning, Emily called the kids outside. She had an idea. "He deserves something special," she said, "for everything he gave to this place, to all of us." With hot chocolate in hand and old blankets wrapped around their shoulders, they built a fire pit near the back fence where the old oak stood. Around it, they placed stones with messages etched in crayon and marker. "Thank you, Bailey. Best dog ever. Welcome home." Mark hung fairy lights across the branches. Sophie made a photo frame with her drawing of Bailey and the man in the rocking chair. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the first stars blinked into view, they brought Bailey out and wrapped him gently in a blanket. He didn't resist. He didn't struggle. He just looked at them each in turn, like he understood what was happening, like he was grateful. They sat around the fire telling stories, not just about Bailey but about how they had changed since he arrived. Emily talked about how the house felt warmer. Mark, who once called Bailey just a stray, admitted he couldn't picture the porch without him. Sophie and Max told him he was magic, that he had brought something invisible and important they couldn't name. Bailey's eyes stayed on the fire the whole time. That night, when they carried him back inside, he didn't go to the porch. He curled up by the fireplace, his head resting on Emily's foot. She didn't move. She didn't sleep. And just before dawn, Bailey let out one soft exhale and didn't take another. No sound.
No struggle.
Just peace. Like a watchman who had finished his final shift and could finally rest. They buried Bailey under the old oak behind the house, just beyond the garden beds he used to sniff every spring. The ground was cold, but the snow had melted that week, like the earth was waiting. Mark dug the hole himself. Emily wrapped Bailey in his blanket. The kids placed his collar and Sophie's drawing beside him, pressed gently between folds of fabric. No words were spoken until the last shovel of soil had been placed. Then Max, barely whispering, said, "He's still here," and no one corrected him. That night, the house was too quiet, the porch too empty. Even the floor felt wrong without Bailey's slow, steady steps. Emily left the back door cracked open out of habit, and when the wind passed through the hallway at midnight, carrying the scent of pine and smoke, she closed her eyes and whispered, "Good boy." The next week, Sophie came home from school with an idea. "We should make a sign," she said, "like a marker, so no one forgets who he was." She and Max spent an entire Saturday painting a wooden plank. They wrote his name in crooked block letters, added stars and paw prints and a small heart in the corner. Mark helped them post it into the soil beneath the oak. Bailey, he belonged here. People in town began stopping by. Word had spread. The mailman left a bouquet of wildflowers. A neighbor brought an old photo from a decade ago, a black and white shot of Mr. Sullivan sitting on the porch with Bailey at his side. Emily placed it on the mantel. "He watched over this house longer than we have," she said. "Maybe longer than we ever will." Days passed. Spring arrived early. Grass crept up around Bailey's resting place. New leaves stretched out over the branches above him. but his presence never left. The kids still talked to him like he was just in the other room. Emily still caught herself pouring a little extra broth into the dog bowl before remembering it was no longer needed. One evening, Emily stepped into the attic for the first time in months. She hadn't planned to. She just felt pulled. Up there, in the far corner, beneath a stack of old books, she found a dusty wooden box. Inside were photos, dozens of them, of Bailey and Mr. Sullivan. But there was more. Letters. Dozens of handwritten letters addressed not to friends or family, but to Bailey. "Dear Bailey," one began, "you're still the best part of my day." Another, "I don't think I'd still be here if not for you." Pages and pages, some tear-stained, some folded and unfolded 100 times. Mr. Sullivan had been alone for years after his wife passed. And in those years, he had written to Bailey every day. "You're the only one who stays," one letter said. "You remember what I forget." Emily read them all. Then she packed them carefully, tied them with twine, and placed them in a drawer by the fireplace. "So he's still here," she said softly. "Still part of the house." The next morning, for the first time in weeks, Max opened the front door and swore he heard paws on the porch. Time did what it always does. It moved forward, not in sudden leaps, but in quiet, daily inches. Spring faded into summer. The kids grew taller, their voices changed. Emily planted flowers by the old oak, and without even meaning to, began referring to it as Bailey's tree. Every so often, someone would leave something by the wooden sign. A stick, a treat, a tiny painted rock. No one said who. No one needed to. Bailey had become part of the town's unspoken rhythm, like the bell from the church tower or the groan of the screen door at the general store. He wasn't a dog anymore. He was a story. Sophie began writing one down, a children's book. She called it The Dog Who Remembered. Her teacher cried when she read it aloud in class. Max, less talkative but no less thoughtful, started placing one of Bailey's old toys on the porch every Sunday morning. Just one. Just for a while. Then he'd quietly tuck it away again. Mark finally fixed the side gate that had never closed right. "Bailey always nudged it open," he said. "Thought maybe I'd finally give it a proper latch." Emily smiled. He'd be proud. Some mornings, the family still caught themselves pausing at the front door, expecting to hear a familiar groan of old paws or the soft click of claws on the floorboards. Instead, they got silence. But it wasn't empty. It was full of memory, full of him. One afternoon in late August, Emily heard a knock. It was an older man, maybe in his 70s, standing at the foot of the porch, holding a folded photograph in his hand. "I used to visit Richard Sullivan," he said, voice gravelly. "We served together. After the war, I lost touch, but I came through town a few times. He talked about that dog like he was his son." Emily invited him in. He didn't stay long, just walked the edge of the porch, looked out at the oak tree, nodded slowly. "He came back?" he asked. Emily nodded. "Almost 10 years later." The man smiled. "Of course he did." Before he left, he handed her the photo. It was faded and creased, but clear enough. Sullivan in uniform, and beside him, a much younger Bailey, barely past puppyhood. "He said he didn't believe in heaven," the man said. "But he said if there was one, dogs would find the door first." That night, Emily framed the photo and placed it above the mantel. Beneath it, she wrote a small note. "He found the way back. Some hearts always do." It was Sophie's idea to build the bench. Not just any bench, a real one. One that would sit under the old oak year-round, made of reclaimed wood from the barn Mark had finally torn down that spring. It started as a summer project, something small. But like most things touched by memory, it grew. Sophie sketched designs. Max helped sand the boards. Mark did the sawing, and Emily stained the planks by hand until the warm cedar color gleamed in the sunlight. On the backrest, Sophie painted a line from her book in delicate, careful brushstrokes. He waited, because love remembers. They placed the bench beneath the tree in early September. The grass was still green, the sky sharp and blue, and the sun filtered through the leaves in a way that made the whole world feel briefly paused. Emily brought out the last piece, Bailey's tag. The one from the collar they'd found in the attic. She screwed it into the armrest. Just a small, weathered piece of metal that said, "Bailey, if found, bring me home." He had found his way home. In the weeks that followed, people began visiting the bench. Some brought dogs, some came alone. A few left notes or tied ribbons to the tree. No one advertised it, no one talked about it much. But somehow the story had spread beyond the town. It was no longer just about Bailey. It was about all of them. The ones who wait, the ones who wander, the ones who remember. One late autumn morning, Emily stepped out onto the porch and saw Max sitting quietly on the bench, staring out across the yard with the kind of stillness rare in a child his age. She sat beside him and waited. After a while, he said, "Do you think dogs go away forever when they die?" Emily looked at the tree, at the bench, at the old bowl still tucked in the garden shed that no one had the heart to throw out. "I think they leave their best parts behind," she said. "And if we're lucky, we keep some of it with us."
Max nodded.
Then, "I think Bailey left a lot." They sat together for a while longer, no rush to go back inside. Because some stories don't end. They settle in the walls of old houses. They grow roots beneath oak trees. They wait at front doors. And they whisper in the silence, soft and steady, like the sound of paws on a wooden floor, still watching, still loving, long after they're gone.